There's not a more emphatic way to win a fight than by submission. And over the years, MMA has played host to some of the most acclaimed jiu-jitsu experts of all time. Today, we look at some submissions nobody saw coming, be it a black belt getting submitted or the unheralded grappler who finished them off. Welcome to the INC, and these are 5 of the most unlikely submission wins in MMA. Rodolfo Vieira entered 2021 as one of the sport's biggest prospects, and with good reason. Between 2009 and 2015, Vieira was considered one of the most dangerous jiu-jitsu practitioners in the world, winning 5 world championships and an ADCC title before transitioning to MMA, where he'd win his first 7 fights and get signed to the UFC in 2019. At UFC 258, Vieira was given the prelim headliner against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, who entered the fight off of a 40-second knockout to Kevin Holland 9 months earlier. Vieira was expected to steamroll his 7-2 opponent, and the early signs proved ominous, as the Brazilian got off to a hot start with an early takedown and actively pursued a submission. The eagerness proved his undoing, as the constant grappling sapped Vieira's cardio and left him vulnerable to Hernandez in the stand-up. Hernandez continued to pepper Vieira throughout the second round before submitting the grappling phenom with a guillotine. A result so shocking, it caused John Anik to swear during the broadcast.
Oh my God, he's getting got it! Anthony fucking Hernandez submits Rodolfo Vieira!
The fight is considered one of the biggest upsets in UFC history, with one bookmaker quoting odds of 2,000 to 1 on Hernandez winning the fight by submission. Vieira admitted the fallout from the fight had an impact on his mental health, describing the loss as the worst day of his life, and confessing to seeing a sports psychologist to get over the loss. Vieira finally returned to action that July, where after some early nerves, returned to his old self with a 3rd round submission of Dustin Stoltzfus. Max Holloway is no stranger to MMA fans, and he's considered one of the best boxers in the UFC. He even says so himself. So it may surprise you to learn Hawaii's finest has a rare submission on his record. After winning his past 5 fights, Holloway took on featherweight veteran Cub Swanson at Fight Night Newark. Having stumbled through the early years of his tenure, the fight was seen as a litmus test for Holloway, and the blessed one appeared to pass the test, using his reach and diverse striking to tag Swanson seemingly at will. Holloway continued to punish Swanson before dropping the veteran in the 3rd. Having ran out of strikes to throw at Cub, Holloway decided to give his grappling a try.
Trying to get free. Got it! It's all over! Max Holloway finishes Cub Swanson!
While Swanson has been submitted several times in his career, including the most in UFC history, doing so to a guy known exclusively as a striker caught many in the sport by surprise. Holloway claimed another submission win against Andre Fili at UFC 172. But in the 6 years since the Swanson fight, he's only made 3 further submission attempts. WEC 43 played host to one of the biggest upsets in MMA history. By 2009, Wagner Fabiano boasted one of the most acclaimed grappling resumes of all time. A 5th-degree black belt under Andre Pederneiras and boasting Renzo Gracie and Minotauro Nogueira as training partners. By the time he signed with the WEC, the Brazilian boasted a 12-1 record and won his last 8 fights. His opponent, Makin Simmerzier, was a former Marine who only made his debut 12 months earlier and was taking the fight on 2 weeks' notice after a late injury to Eric Koch. Early, the bout looked the way it was anticipated, an early takedown from Fabiano and attempting to pry the Virginian into a better position. As Fabiano re-entered his opponent's guard, Mackins threw up his legs to catch the grappling ace in a triangle choke. The man dubbed the featherweight Maya was submitted 2 minutes into the first.
Oh my God! He had to tap! Makin Semizer has shocked the world! You have got to be kidding me!
The shock result caused an immediate stir. Some bookmakers had Mackins as high as 8-1 to claim an upset win over Fabiano, while MMA website SureDog voted the fight as the biggest upset of 2009. Mackins never capitalized on the upset, losing his next 3 fights before a forgettable run in the UFC, while Fabiano faded out of the spotlight after another submission loss to Joe Benavidez 12 months later. Jermaine Derandomy isn't the first person you think of when it comes to submissions. Derandomy is considered one of the greatest female strikers of all time, an unbeaten kickboxing champion boasting some of the hardest hands in the bantamweight division, but her limited grappling skill often left her vulnerable when the fight hit the mat. After a failed attempt to win the bantamweight title, Derandomy took on Ultimate Fighter winner Juliana Pena at UFC Fight Island. The fight played out the way many expected, with Derandomy using her striking to win the first round, and Pena claiming the second when she finally got the Iron Lady to the mat. Pena seemingly had the fight in her domain when she clinched Derandomy in the middle of the final round, until the Dutch fighter decided to try this newfangled move called a guillotine?
She's out. Derandomy ends it by submission. Pena shot in for a takedown. Oh my goodness. And that ends it.
Another unlikely women's sub took place days later, when Chris Cyborg defended her Bellator featherweight title with a rear naked choke of Arlene Blencow, making the first submission win in 15 years for the MMA legend. Derandomy hasn't fought since the match, presumably still recovering from shock. Sadly for Pena, it wasn't the first time she got submitted by a girl known exclusively for her striking.
Oh, she got Valentina Shevchenko by submission!
When you hear the name Kevin Burns, you think of his controversial match with Rumble Johnson in 2008. But few remember the Iowa native had the best night of his career just 1 month earlier. At UFC 85, Burns made his company debut against Juan Carneiro, a Pan-American ADCC champion who'd previously faced the likes of John Fitch and Anderson Silva. The opening stanza was all Carneiro, maintaining position after an early takedown and restricting Burns to just 2 strikes landed in the first 5 minutes. Carneiro looked to repeat the trick at the start of the second round, until Burns threw his legs for a triangle and broke Joe Rogan's voice box in the process.
And Burns with a very quick guard. See how fast he just swiveled his hips? He's got a triangle!
Can he finish it?
Carneiro was forced to submit 3 minutes into the second round. The third-degree jiu-jitsu black belt was submitted by a guy who a few months earlier had just received his blue belt. Carneiro bounced between smaller promotions before returning to the UFC, including a first-round submission of Mark Munoz, and having just beaten a grappling ace at their own game, Burns decided to let his hands do the talking against Rumble. Or should that be his fingers?
Those open hand punches of Kevin Burns, he was warned about him earlier, and he finally caught Johnson big time.
And now, time for a few honorable mentions. Former heavyweight boxer Butterbean holds 10 submission wins in his MMA career, albeit against small Japanese men a third of his size. Matt Hughes claimed the final win of his career by submitting ADCC legend Ricardo Almeida. Justin Gaethje claimed the sole submission of his career at a Rage in the Cage event in 2012. Amazing, considering the dark forces normally stop him going to the ground. This is the INC. Like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video.